Hey, hi, good morning, everybody. Today in our Going Digital series, we have Raghuram with us. So, Raghuram is a master's in computer science from Ohio State University. He's based in the US. He's worked for companies like Intel, like Groupon, and now he's been with Netflix for over 5.5 years, and he is one of the authorities and experts in this new and happening field in computer science called microservices architecture. Extremely exciting, mysterious in a way, but has the capacity to transform the way applications are built and consumed. We are going to have Raghuram speaking to us about this topic of microservices architecture. Welcome to our Going Digital series, Raghuram.
Hey Siddharth, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure for me to join you here and discuss these microservices.
Great. The first question, Raghuram, it will be great if you can, share with us what is this microservices architecture. Kind of demystify it for us. Maybe you could provide a few examples as well.
Yep. So, in our day-to-day life, we actually are already thinking of using lots of services. And when, for example, you're using your Microsoft Word document and you're basically writing a document and editing it, it is using hard disk and RAM and so on under the hood. But all of that application is in a single monolith. But if you wanted to do this at scale, you will not be able to have that much RAM or disk for everybody to be able to edit all of their information in one place. And that's where microservices come into the picture, because now you have different layers of things and services being split up, where each service is handling a small part of the whole. That's why it's micro, it's smaller. But on its own, it is maybe useless. But as a whole, all of them work together and provide a lot of value in terms of being able to scale and also being able to develop faster in being much more agile when you need to move and add newer features very quickly and be able to test and so on.
Help me understand maybe a little bit about the components of this microservices architecture. What are the parts of it? What are the constituent parts? What are the things that one needs to look at here?
Yeah. So when we say something is a microservice, right, or when we say that an application is using microservices, for example, let's take Netflix, where we have, when you log into Netflix, you have a page where you see a bunch of titles. Now, in the background, that's actually reaching out to different varying kinds of services to put together that page. Because you have trailers, you have images, you have text, for example. Now, these three things are very different. Trailers are being pulled from, let's say, one microservice, whereas the images, because the rest of the page is static, could be pulled from a different microservice. And now text might need to be localized. So that localization itself there's business logic in there. Now, if I had all of this logic in one single service, then you're stepping on each other's toes when it comes to all this, because you have localization team working on something, and then everything has to be put together. But when we have all of this separate, then you get the uh, advantage of being able to put them together on the fly, but at the same time add features for each of the different things. So I can add new localizations without having to disturb the rest of the service, and be able to add value to my application at differing rates. So when I need, for example, when your website goes international, you need maximum localization. You might not need other things. You might need dubbing and subtitles being added. So you scale up only that team. So even from a developer perspective, you only add more people to that team because that team is going to be more important at that point in time. And then you can move people around when, let's say, suddenly you want to do some A/B testing and figure out what kind of trailers will work better, and so on. So you get the agility of that, and at the same time, you have another very important thing is you can do testing in a very contained manner. So it's a double-edged sword in this sense, but because if you can, now that you're testing, you have to test not just your microservice, but also the end-to-end flow. And most microservices environments, what we end up doing is we have like a sandbox, so that when before everything goes out into production and is used by clients, you have a sandbox environment where everything can bake in and you can see that everything is working correctly and so on. That's another way.
Lovely. So, in what kind of situations would you see that, like let's take the example of some of these big, big applications, right? Like an SAP or an Oracle, big, massive applications which have modules within them, right? Software companies have traditionally built big monolithic applications. But in what kind of situation do you see that it makes sense for these kind of software companies to use the microservices architecture? What are the use cases? What kind of situation would one do that?
Yeah. Uh, the main advantages you get from microservices, and one of the ways you can, there's no specific rule of thumb to say, hey, this is the cutoff where you have to switch to microservices. But if you see that your development time is taking longer because you need to invest more in getting together all of the services to work correctly, or when I say services in a monolithic, when all of the modules to work correctly with each other, because all the developers are committing to the same code repository, or you're stuck to a single language because that's how the monolithic application was written, which means you can't have one part of it running C++ and the other running Python or something like that. But in microservices, that is possible. Again, whether that is a requirement is based on if one portion of your application needs to be very fast, you would obviously write that service in something like C++ or even Rust, which is coming up pretty quickly now. And you could use other things which are slower because you need more flexibility in, like, let's say, designing machine learning prototypes on the back end. So you might use Python for that. And at the same time, now, when you have failure handling, for example, in a monolithic application, if any part of a module fails, you need to make sure how that failure is propagated or handled at that level or propagated to the higher levels. But in microservices, if one portion of your entire large distributed system is failing, only that is failing. It does have follow-on effects, but you can look at that in isolation and figure out how to fix it and deploy something to mitigate that issue. Now, the other main advantage, which we talked about or touched on a bit before, was with respect to scaling. Like, as I was saying, you wouldn't, in a single monolithic service, if your application needed more memory, you would need to basically upgrade to a larger size machine. But now with microservices, if one portion of your application requires more memory, you would only scale up that particular microservice and not touch the others. So, or you would put, for example, a distributed cache in front of it because you need more memory, and a distributed cache will be able to handle that even with smaller, by partitioning your data, by having and have smaller RAM on each machine and so on. So these are some of the advantages. I mean, there's also the other obvious advantage of being able to figure out how a particular failure, like going back to the failure handling, how you can mitigate those failures by even doing things like circuit breakers, where basically what we are saying is, hey, do not keep calling this other microservice beyond a particular point because I know that it's already failing. And then we will have like a default reply which can come in and then take it from there, so that uh, while that other service is failing, we don't hit it more and more with requests which will basically exacerbate the problem instead of going towards a solution. So since you can think of these things separately, and you also can have the advantage of having developer teams work on their own services and be able to uh, make progress on each of those parallelly. That's the other advantage which we can have.
So one interesting thought based on what you said, Raghu, that even in the previous architecture discussions we used to have, there used to be the three-tier architecture, right? The application layer, the database layer, and the the UI layer. How does that differ from microservices architecture?
Yeah, that's actually a very good point, right? Like we are reinventing some things here when you look at microservices, and previously you had the three layers. Now, if you think about that, the three layers are also kind of, they could have been very easily split into microservices and handled whatever they were doing in the exact same way. And when you look at any monolithic architecture program also, right? It's not that everything is just in one single code file and
Yeah.
you have to go through everything and you just have switch cases or if and else and so on and so forth in your in that service. But I think the way things are moving, it's moving towards more disparate or more separated services, because things are getting faster. Like network is getting faster, CPU is getting better, memory is getting faster, and so on. So I think we're seeing this as more of, we get the same amount of speed with network latency also.
Lovely. So now, if I have to compare this with the monolithic architecture, right, where you're building everything in one go. So thanks for demarcating what are the benefits of this versus this. But obviously, microservices architecture, you kind of touched upon earlier, would come with its own set of challenges as well, right? Unique challenges, and there are a lot of scary articles written about the challenges that one must be careful about. So you want to just share with us what are these challenges? We have spoken about the benefits. You want to add anything more? That's great. Otherwise, what are the challenges that companies that are looking to move from a particular architecture to this microservices architecture? What are the challenges they must be aware of, and what's the best way to mitigate them?
Yeah, that's a very good question, right? Because obviously you don't get only positives. There are issues with microservices, and let's look through a few of them. For example, when you have microservices, you end up having dependencies between the services. For example, like let's go back to the Netflix UI, which was calling different services to put those things together and give you the web page. Now, if one of those services is doing something wrong, or since we are saying these are dependent on each other, uh, let's say one of these services was upgraded to a new version, and that is no longer compatible with how the whole web page is being put together. Now, whatever is putting it together might not be aware of that, and you can have things failing, right? Because you can have verification at a unit testing level where you say, hey, my service is performing as expected, but what is the API it has, or the contract it has with the other services, and what is the end result? What does the end result look like? Those are the questions we would need to answer. And we kind of touched upon this a bit. Was one of the ways to get around this dependency issue is to have like sandbox environments which can basically replicate as much as possible your production environment, so that you can actually see things working before it goes into production. But this can, obviously you cannot catch every possible combination of what your users will be using. And one of the other ways you can handle this is by making sure that you have what we call as canary deployments. A canary deployment is where you say, hey, I'm going to open up this newer version for only 1% of the traffic. And most of the time, microservices have the assumption that you will have if there are errors, you will have retries and something built in on the client side. So the assumption is, so when you open up your new version of one particular portion of the microservice to 1% of the traffic, for example, then your users might see an error, but then when most of the time users will refresh if they see an issue, which is what we have been like conditioned to do in the digital world today, right? So when that happens, there's a very low chance that you'll still fall back into that 1% traffic. So you will go past that. But on the server side, on the microservice side, I'm seeing, oh, all of this 1% traffic, which is coming to this portion of the new version, has issues. And this is where another very important thing comes into the microservices architecture is you need to have very good monitoring in order to be able to detect this immediately and say, okay, there is something wrong. Let's kill this and then go back and look at what's going wrong and be able to reproduce it. And that's where the monitoring and logging comes into play. Because when you have both of these, monitoring will tell you, hey, there is a problem, and logging will tell you what were the sequence of events which led to that problem. And given these two, you can then post an incident, you can go back and say, hey, this is what happened, and then fix for it, and then try to deploy again. So you do the canary deployment again, and then you scale back if you hit issues. The idea is you iterate that way. And because you're in the microservices architecture, you're able to iterate very quickly because it's a separate team which is doing all this, and then you'll be able to get things out the door very quickly because you don't need to rely on, oh, there is one release cycle which happens every 4 weeks or 3 months or whatever might be a monolithic development cycle, architecture development cycle. So you won't need to wait for all that. You just release your service separately. The other thing which also comes into play here is you could version your services so that you say, all of my previous versions will still stay, but when my dependencies need to upgrade, they can test against my newer version and verify and then upgrade their APIs to be compatible with my newer version. And you deprecate older versions as you go, as and when people stop using them. And the other portion of this is you need to have a very good CI/CD pipeline or continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline, which basically is so that you can leverage the fact that your developers are working on things very quickly. And at the same time, which means that they're also releasing all of that pretty quickly. So you also have all of that built into, so when somebody commits code, you build that version of it, you're able to deploy that to a sandbox environment or test environment, take it from there, and then have like a list of checkpoints which can be handled. So when all of this comes into play, we also need to have in the microservices world what we call service discovery, because now in a monolithic application, right, everything is in-house, like everything is within your application, so you don't need to look for anything. But in a microservices world, you don't know where anything is. So you need to have somebody who will tell you, you need to have this spotlight discovery kind of service, which will tell you, hey, this is where your authentication services, or this is where your image services, and so on. So that when deployments are happening, the discovery service keeps track of what is current, and you don't need to go and hard code something or look for IP addresses or something like that. Yeah, so those are.
Lovely. That's a beautiful exposition of all the challenges and how one needs to handle them. I'm sure there are a lot more things, but I thought I'll just ask a slightly different question. For a person who wants to, delve, let's say, working in, this kind of a field, microservices architecture, obviously, at the micro application level, there will be a certain set of skills, right? Somebody is a Python developer, somebody is a Java developer, and so on. So, each microservice, maybe, a person can work in any of those. But for the person who's kind of overseeing the whole thing, right? what kind of skills does a person need to have, and how does one develop them? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think so. When it comes to, as you clearly pointed out, right, like it's not about being a single language developer. Like I can be a Python developer and have microservices, or I can be a Java developer and do the same thing. It's more about being able to think about uh, things in as distributed a fashion as possible. What I mean by that is uh, anything could fail at any time, meaning there could be what we call a network partition, for example. Like my service is not able to talk to my database. But in a microservice, you should have the possibility that you should have the mindset that, okay, anything where I'm talking to another service could go disappear into thin air, and then I should be able to handle that. I should be able to gracefully come back from that, or be able to alert somebody that, hey, my database service is gone. I don't know where it is, or it's not responding anymore. Or the other thing you need to also think about is what do you do when you write something, we call them idempotent writes, meaning when something is written and written again, it shouldn't matter that the write happened twice. So these are some concepts in distributed systems which you need to be comfortable with, understand, and be have them on the top of your mind when you're designing and developing these systems. So in terms of skills, coming down to that question specifically, right? What I'm trying to say is, I think the best way is to look at some certification programs in like cloud infrastructure, like AWS has them, Azure has them, Google Cloud, all of these have certifications. That will give you an insight into what are the tools available, because you need to have tools in order to be able to equip yourself.
Absolutely,
And
yeah.
the other portion of that would be, how would you then use this? And I feel that the best way for that is, of course, there are books in pretty much every field nowadays, but the best way would be to look at how systems today are solving for it. For example, you can go and read about, hey, how is Google Maps a distributed system, or how is Netflix a distributed system? There are lots of tech blogs which a lot of these companies write. It'll be more about, yeah, obviously when you first start looking at it, there's a lot of jargon thrown at you, but as you get more and more familiar with it and you have these certifications, which will be the tools which will help you, it should get easier, and you should be able to make progress there.
Last question in terms of the direction which things are taking. Today microservices architecture is a new topic, fairly new topic, whereas the others have been around for decades. How do you see this moving in the future, in terms of the balance of approaches?
Yeah, I think it's not going to be that monolithic architectures are going to be obsolete or something like that. I think each has their space, but with more and more applications requiring larger scale, I see wherever we need larger scale, we would need to go into the microservices world. And you might still have your application on your desktop, which will be a monolithic application, but something where you have lots of users and you're collecting a lot of data and using that, which is what we do almost all the time now. I think that we'll move more towards microservices.
Lovely. These are some very nice, practical, and still very scientific and technical inputs you've shared, Raghuram. This has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your inputs on microservices architecture, and look forward to staying in touch with you on this topic.
Yeah, same here. Thanks a lot. This was really fun doing this.